Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we find ourselves as wizards reshaping the political landscape by conjuring rivers, founding cities, and turning areas asunder for maximum influence. Geomandering is a dice drafting game of magical mischief and territorial manipulation. It's for 1 to 4 players. It takes 45 to 90 minutes to play, depending on the map size you choose. It's for ages 12 and up and published by Arabellum Games, creator of print and play games Moonlight and Hive, with Hive making it to the top 25 of the Board Game Geek's hotness for 48 hours. Now, it's being crowdfunded right now, and I'm going to show you how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side. This is a crowdfunding preview, so anything you see here is subject to change. Check the link in the description of this video to see the project page for all the most up-to-date art, components, and pledge levels. Now what we're looking at here is the setup for the 2-player base game, which by the way, is available for a free download if you go to the campaign page in the link below, and you can download and play that for free. Now, here up at the top, we see a map, and they're going to be drawing and adding influence and things like that. We'll show you that in a moment. And then closer to the players, each of the players have their own homes as well. Now, I also want to note that what you're seeing here, this 2-player base map, is just a small fraction of the overall content of the game. And then at the time of filming this, there's going to be 22 planned stretch goals that unlock all sorts of other maps and modes of play as well. Now here we have the starting of the game, where we have this map here, and there are population centers, and they come pre-printed on the map as you see here. Now at the beginning of the game, each player is going to get to start and have some influence in one of those. They're based on numbers that you roll a die at the beginning of the game to see where you start in the different population centers. So we have the red person and the green person playing. Now at the beginning of the game, this is all one big region. Now over the course of the game, you have influence here, and you're going to be trying to spread that influence and gain influence in different areas, and then subdivide the regions into smaller regions so that you have influence in more regions than your opponent. For every region you have more influence in them, you'll get a point. Whoever has the most points wins. So over the course of the game, you're going to be trying to expand that influence into different squares that are adjacent to places that you already have influence, for example. Each of the people in the population centers is 1 influence, and this is 1 influence. So in this case, red has 2, since this is still one big region, where green has this 1. Sometimes you might be adding to population centers for influence there as well, or even to new ones. Sometimes you'll be casting spells like to create dwellings, and you'll be writing influence numbers into empty fields like this. This one's actually worth 2 influence. So in this whole area, since it's one big region, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, where the green has 2. And your dwellings don't only stay at 2. Sometimes you're going to be able to create some as 3s or 4s as you get more powerful spells. So a few turns later, the board might look something like this, and the green player might cast an incinerate spell, charring this specific square, taking away the 2 influence that red player had. Now charring can also sometimes subdivide lands. It doesn't do that here, but we'll get more into that later. And sometimes you might be using spells to carve rivers, which are going to start from the mountain, and they're going to flow, and they're going to start to subdivide the land into different areas, maybe trying to cut off a big spot of green to red, sometimes cutting down the middle. We're going to talk more about how you do this and why you would do this in just a moment. So let's show you what it looks like at the end to show you how you score, to see what you're really trying to do and how everything works out, now that you know the basics of what you're trying to do. So let's look at the regions. Earlier I told you that the rivers can subdivide the areas, but so can the charged squares. So if we look at this one big region here. It's like this, we have a region like this, and you can see this, and you have a population center. Now, only regions with population centers score. And of course, this one has at least 1, actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, because even the dwellings are considered population centers. So we look at this whole region here, and we're going to count influence. Green has 1, 2, red has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Red wins that region, so they get 1 point. You're trying to have the most points. We look at this region here. Again, it's cut off by the big mountain, and we've got the rivers here that cut this off, so it's just these 4 squares. Red has 1, 2, 3. Green has 1, 2, 3, 4. So green won that one, so right now it's tied 1 to 1. So now we look at this one. It's 4 squares here, and it has the river here, the river, and the mountain. So this is completely walled off. These 4 squares are a region, and it does have a population center because the dwellings are considered a population center. And so in this case, green has 1, 2, 3, and red has 2. So green wins that one. So green is up 2 to 1. Next, we look at this large region. Again, it's walled off by the edges, by the river, and by this big mountain. And so this is all one large region. So we look at red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We look at green. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's tied. No one wins that. So right now, green's still up 2 points to 1. However, because of the subdividing, again, because the river helped subdivide and this charged square started to subdivide, this is a 1 square region. Now it has influence, but there's no population center there because there's no sort of village and there's no dwelling, which is a number. So even though red has influence on this one region, there's no population center, so it's not worth anything. Same with these 2 squares. This charred and this river caused these 2 squares to be its own region. Red has 2 influence in it, but there's no population center, so they don't score anything for that. So in the end, green wins 2 to 1 because they scored 2 regions and red only scored 1, and of course they tied in this large region. So that's how scoring works, and that's what you're trying to do. So now that you know how you score what you're trying to do, how do you go about doing that? Well, on the map at the top of it, there's going to be dice. There's going to be 6 dice that are rolled, and they're going to be there like this at the beginning of the game. And as you can see, they go into certain spots. So the 1s go here, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s, and the 6s go here. On your turn, you're going to go back and forth with turns. On your turn, you're going to do a draft phase where you must draft a die or dice in one of these, from one of these numbers. And then you're going to go through a tome phase, which is usually optional. So let's say it's the green player's turn. This is where the map is where I left it off. Let's just say this is what the dice pool looked like right now. Now, they could draft any of these. Let's say the green player drafts this 5. Now notice this has a left arrow. They're going to take this 5. And because of the left arrow, they could put an X into any open square that's to the left of something they already have influence in. So maybe they just want to put an X here because it is to the left of one that they already have influence in. Now, each player gets one of these, and once they've placed that die, they're going to put it in the cube storage, which is right here. We're going to talk about all these things. We talked about casting spells and things like that. This board helps you facilitate all of that, but you're going to store that cube. It's called a cube, but it's actually a die there. Now, I mentioned the tome phase is optional because you don't have to spend these dice. These are, you're storing these for later to use as different actions. And it's only mandatory if your tower is full. Now our tower's here, we have 2 spots to store. If both of these were full, and then I draft another die, I would need to spend them using these. Otherwise, if there's no dice left in the draft pool, I need to do it as well. So let's talk about what these do. So let's say it was the next turn of this same player, and they're in the tome phase, and let's say they have a 5 and a 1, and they want to use these. And again, you can use them in different areas. We'll talk about what these do. One of the places you can use them is in your tower construction. This is going to allow you to build up your tower because as you fill up more floors, these then become storages, meaning you can go more turns without being forced to use these dice during the tome phase. So a 5 shows you the shape you can use. A 1 shows you 2 of these. So I can draw 2 squares and then 1 of these. And all of these can be flipped, mirrored, rotated, things like that. But they need to be drawn on the bottom of the tower and then work your way up. So let's say for the 5, I flipped this and did it like this. Now it can go from floor to floor. So this one actually does go, and it actually is 3 high. So it does go 1, 2, then this third one here. So it's starting to build both floors, but you got to start from the bottom there. And here you have these 2 single ones. I put 1 here and I put 1 here. Now, you can build on top of things and have some spaces underneath that are sort of uncovered, but you can't just like floatingly put things up in the middle of nowhere. There's some other minor rules, but I'm not going to go over all of them now. And again, once you finish the floor, that's where you can store those cubes for later. Then you'd roll the ones that you stored and just used, and you would add them back to the dice pool. Now, one thing we haven't mentioned yet are 6s. 6s don't get used for actions. They essentially become storage for you, and they're very powerful on your own board because they're basically wild. Now let's talk about the forbidden geometry here in the lower right. Now you'll see this sort of pentagram here, and you have numbers. Let's say I had stored and just used a 1 and a 3. You'd then color in that line between 1 and 3 like that, assuming it's empty. So now it's colored in, and notice that you can only color in the lines that have these solid white, like the pentagram. You can't go from 1 to 2, for example. Now let's say in a future turn, I used a 1 and a 4. And so I'd color that in too. And now that I've done both, for the 1, I'd circle that. And on a future turn, when I draft the 1, if there's a second die there, you can take 2 dice if you want to. It's optional. Now, when you do take that second die, you can't use it to create influence, meaning you'd take one of these and you would color in one of your meeples at a population center. The second one basically gets stored and used on your board, not used for influence, but it does give you more options to take actions on your board. Now let's say you go into the Regent's Garden, and let's say we have dice that we're going to be using. Let's say we have a 1 and a 2. So you start in the middle, and when you move 1, you can move it any cardinal direction. So let's say we move here. You circle this. For the second die, we have a 2. We can move 2 from here. So let's say we want to move down here. When you move 2, we circle where we move 2, and then we X out where we move from, and this gives us essentially things that we're going to make spells with. For example, this is a Sporeberry cap, and I'm going to be able to circle it like this because now I have one of these to spend, and that's going to be used to cast spells. Now, to cast a spell, you can use 2 dice, again, that you've stored here when you take the tome actions, and you use 2 that equals 7, or you use a 6. We told you a 6 is wild, but it also helps you cast a spell. Now, to cast a spell, you're going to be using the different regions that you're getting there. So when using these spells, you're going to be using these regions. Like this spell here, that allows you to create dwellings, and it uses a Sporeberry cap. So we would essentially use one of these, we'd cross it off, and we'd use this. And what this allows you to do is create a population center. Now you start with a level 1 of each of these different spells. This allows you to create that population center, which, as we saw earlier, is going to be able to be writing the number 2 in to an empty spot. And remember, that's important because that's essentially influence as face value, 2 influence, for example. Using the Incinerate spell allows you to destroy a population center, and with your level 1 spell, which is what you start with, you can destroy a 2. So essentially that's how the green player then destroyed this. Now you can destroy your own population center. Sometimes it might be worth it depending on how the regions are being divided and such, but that's how to incinerate. Now that spell used the beetle, and this one allows you to carve a river, and that uses the ripple drought in order to do that. So let's say that was the green player that did that, and they want to draw a river and carve it out. And so let's say green draws this one. Now there's lots of little rules on how to draw rivers. I'm not going to go over all of them, but generally speaking, it starts from the mountain, it goes all the way to the edge of the map, and you must have by default influence at least next to somewhere where the river's going. So green drew this, green drew it here because they have influence here, and they could draw it there because they had influence there. Now you can't go like parallel to the mountain or parallel to the edge and things like that. Now you can start at the same point of origin. Like I could start here and then just come this way, but you can't, split, fork, or connect other rivers, but they can start from the same point. Someone could draw one down here, for example. Now we're going to talk about how those subdivide regions in just a moment, but I want to give you one example here. Now these spells, we all told you that were level 1s. Now you can complete these rows. There's 2 more rows for each of the types of spells, and if you complete a row, it's going to be level 2. If you complete another row, it's going to be a level 3 of that spell. Now how you do that is you cross off numbers. Like let's say I had a 3 and a 1 to use. I might want to cross off a 3 and a 1. Now you can't start a higher level attunement of a spell without completing this. So I'd have to get a 2, a 4, or a 5. Remember that 6s are wild here. And once I do this, I'd have a level attunement that tells you what it does. Like this one says, you ignore the influence in one segment when drawing the river. Level 3, if you got all this done, then you could ignore it in 2 segments. And that's really important. Let's say that green had that level 3 carve river spell. And normally they have influence here. They don't have influence here or here, so they don't have influence here. Normally they would not be able to draw it here. They also wouldn't be able to draw it here because red has influence on these. Green has influence here, green has influence here. So there's 2 sections of the river that they normally would not have been able to draw, and so they wouldn't be able to put the river there. However, if they had that level 3 spell, they could ignore 2 squares the way they don't have influence, and they could draw this river. And what does that do? Let's look at the subdivision of the regions here. That was a smart play by green because by doing this, they cut this off. Remember, charred areas and this river help subdivide the land. And that locked this 2 influence into a region that's not going to score for red because it doesn't have a population center in it. Meaning it's not one of the villages, and it's not a number, a dwelling. Now, drawing a river or carving a river is one of the most important parts of the game. It's also the most dangerous too because this is a shared map, and typically you're drawing this with pens. So if you create a river and you did it incorrectly or you did it illegally, you lose the game. So you need to make sure that you're doing it correctly. And of course, levels 2 or 3 of the other spells are equally powerful. So when you're creating dwellings, you can create a 3 or a 4. If you're at level 2 or 3 there. And again, that's getting you 3 or 4 influence instead of just 2 with the level 1 spell. Here, when you're incinerating, you can destroy a level 3 or level 4 population, where in the level 1 spell, you can only destroy a number 2 dwelling. Now, anytime you're charring or carving rivers, you might subdivide into new regions, and that's when you update the region track at the bottom here. Now, right here, we see this. This is one big region right here, 1. This is 2, and because this is here, this is going to be 3, and then this one is 4. So there's 4 regions. So anytime you carve a river or char, you check to see if you need to update this track. Right now, there are 4 regions. This is important because one of the end game conditions on this map is when there are 6 or more regions. The other way it ends if all the squares are filled in. Like in the scoring example I showed you earlier, this square still wasn't filled in, but that's okay because there were 6 regions that ended the game. And as I showed previously, you're just trying to have the most points, and you're getting points by having the most influence in regions that have a population center. Now, I mentioned that there are a ton of maps. Definitely check out the link in the description of the video to see the project page, but there are a ton of different maps of different sizes. The smaller ones take about 45 minutes to play, the larger ones up to 90 minutes to play. Here is a much larger map, which with different size of population centers. Like this one can hold 5. This one can hold 3. This one can hold 2. So it gives you a lot of different things to think about. There's also other borders in some of these as well. And like in this one, you need to actually get to the 12 separate regions in order to end this game. So go check out all the different maps and all different modes of play available on the crowdfunding project. Well, there you have Geomandering, and as I showed in the overview, you'll be trying to gain influence by drafting dice, occupying population centers, gathering regions, casting spells, creating dwellings, and subdividing the regions to your benefit. Now, if you'd like to see the most up-to-date art and components and all the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me right in the description of this video. That's going to take you right to the crowdfunding project page, and I'm sure that Arrowbellum Games would love your support.